Hello, my friend. So glad you could join us for this episode where we're talking about building secure love, transforming attachment patterns with Dr. Julie Menanno. This is a dream come true episode for me because I love Dr. Menanno's work on the secure relationship on Instagram. She has over 1 million people following her, the Gottman Institute, Dr. Sue Johnson, the late Dr. Sue Johnson, who I did my emotionally focused research on, also has written a compliment to this book before she passed. And I cannot share enough good things about the work that you are about to hear about and about to hopefully read and get acquainted with on Instagram and Facebook as well, if you're not already, with Dr. Julie. She is so gifted in the layers of attachment work. And you might or might not be familiar with the patterns of attachment. I noticed that a lot of our followers were new this year, so I'll just remind you that we're talking about secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and a myriad of other types of attachment that you can have just because we're humans and we're a mixed bag sometimes. And we're also talking about ways that in your relationships you can feel a lot safer together. Dr. Julie not only flips the script on some of the reasons why we struggle in our attachments and helps us to not shame ourselves, but to come out of the negative patterns, but she also helps us to see that there are even adaptive strategies to our fawning responses where we're showing kindness. She reminds us that our freezing responses help us to pause. All through her book, her work, and even here with us today, she reminds us start wherever you are. Find the good in it and then also make it better, right? We're always thinking, how can we make things 1% better? How can we go deeper? How can we truly go forward together and know the good we share, but also bring toward more health together, more secure attachment together? So you are in the right place. So glad you joined us today. That's exactly what we're doing in this powerful conversation together with Dr. Julie. So stay right here. We're going to remind you briefly that the Enneagram Relationship Intensive starts tomorrow. So if you need more time together with me to really walk through some of the deeper dive patterns, then don't forget about that in the show notes. And also, and you'll be seeing the copy, especially if you're watching on YouTube. I'm going to show you Dr. Julie's beautiful book, but she has so much for you here as well to dive in deeper. And so many, my favorite, I think, place of the book, so many places, but especially one, there's a chart that shows you if you're thinking that when you react anxiously or you withdraw in this way that it's good. I'm going to show you why you do it, but also what's maladaptive about it, as well as what's better, and even give you scripts for how that's better. So I love that she does that. We are getting you all shored up today. Plus, we get to hear about her a little bit personally on her Myers-Briggs levels too. So yeah, and for all kinds of fun, let's talk to Dr. Julie right here. Julie, thank you so much for joining us for the Enneagram and Marriage podcast.
You're welcome. It's so good to be here.
Oh my gosh, we're thrilled to have you, many of us in our collective membership group. And of course, everyone across the internet loves your work on
Oh, thank
attachment.
you.
So thank
Yeah.
you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, I am a couples therapist by trade. So that's my first job, which I'm super passionate about. And then from that, I do, my Instagram, which allows me I do attachment work. So I do a modality called emotionally focused therapy for couples. And basically, that uses attachment theory to treat couples to help them go from insecure attachment to secure attachment. So, with my Instagram account, that's me kind of putting out the information that I use to treat the couples in my practice for people who, want to improve their relationship using the same principles. And then I have the book Secure Love, which walks couples through the process, the self-help version of the process that I use to treat the couples in my practice. And then from that, the next step is the podcast Secure Love, which uses a real couple for 20 sessions to bring to life the work that's laid out in the book that is a reflection of the clinical practice. So it all kind of comes
Oh
full circle.
my gosh, podcast
Yeah.
also. That's amazing.
I just right before we hopped on, I just did I'm finishing up with my season 2 couple right now. So
My goodness, this gives us so many places to find you and allows us this opportunity to do the work with you. I love you. Thank you for inviting us in because I know you're a busy couples therapist. And now the podcast where we get to see a couple and the book, especially, I've been treasuring already. So grateful to have it here with us for those watching on YouTube. It's a national bestseller, right? That's what I see here.
It is. Yes, it
Oh,
is.
it's doing so well. And of course, because we love EFT over here as well. That was my
Awesome.
master's thesis. And
Oh,
the late Dr.
beautiful.
Sue Johnson was going to be on the pod, and
Yes.
then she got sick. And
Oh,
so I knew it wasn't
oh,
meant to be, but
yeah.
her work and her legacy lives on. And it sounds like you have a very deep vested interest in that as well. Can you tell
Very
for
much
listeners who
so.
don't know much about her or that, just as a
Mhm.
refresher, we have a not lot of new listeners this year, just a little bit about
Sure.
EFT.
Yeah, so attachment theory was created in the 1940s by a man named John Bowlby, who was basically a child psychiatrist, and he was working at a home for juvenile delinquents, all boys. And at the time, the idea, the narrative, and the whole, mental health community was that we're just sort of born with these pathologies, and they're just a part of our biological makeup. And the idea that there was some sort of family, um, issues or dysfunction that could be the cause of this pathology was just completely out of left field.
Mm,
So he started noticing all these boys that he's treating. I think there were 30 of them at the time. Like every one of them had some sort of parental disruption in the parental relationship at a young age.
mm,
So it even something like a hospitalization of the mom for an extended hospitalization of the mom, so they all had some sort of friction. And then from that, he realized, oh, there's something to this. Like there's something to this attachment bond between parent and child. If that gets disrupted, you're going to see a lot of problems later on, and probably even then. But problems don't a lot of time become super apparent until adolescence. And
mm,
so from that, he just started theorizing and developing this theory called attachment theory, which is basically that, which is we need to feel safe and secure in our closest relationships to do well in the world, to feel okay, to feel at peace, to be able to go explore and, kind of expand our humanity. And if we don't have those, then we're going to feel some sense of angst and anxiety.
mm,
And that angst and anxiety is going to get acted out. And so, years later, a woman named Mary Ainsworth, and he and some other people started researching, and they were really just looking at the parent-child relationship at the time. And what they found is you can categorize people into categorizations that describe the way they handle their attachment energy, right? So insecure attachment creates this kind of yucky feeling, and you can predict how someone's going to respond to that yucky based on their attachment style. And then from that, some researchers starting with Hazen and started applying this information to romantic partnerships. So that's where Sue Johnson comes in. And with that research, she starts doing her own research and building on that. And then I think she's the most brilliant mind in
ah,
this whole big picture, because then she creates an instruction manual,
mm,
right? She takes all
mm,
this information and she says, I'm going to create an instruction manual for therapists to use this information to heal couples.
mm,
And then she created emotionally focused therapy, which
mm.
is, what we do.
Yes, you're attaching to your partner in a way that feels safe and bonded. And you've done a great job of really carrying her legacy on in a huge way. You have an enormous following. And one of the reasons I think that is I believe your personality has something to do with it. You're very good at clarifying and you're able to do well with the five senses. Of course, you have a team as well, but you can just see that flows from you. What is your Myers-Briggs? I know you don't know Enneagram, but what would you say your Myers-Briggs most closely is?
It is INFP. And I figured this out many years. I don't know. How long has Myers-Briggs been going? A long time, right?
Yes. Yes, since the early World War One, I believe.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't figure it out then because I wasn't
Yeah.
around,
Yes.
but I did figure it out relatively early in life,
Yeah.
and it just hit. It was hit
Mm.
hard. I mean, I'm just like textbook INFP, which I believe psychologist is one of the, careers of an I, and maybe librarian also. But no, for sure, hands down, I
Oh,
poster child
yeah.
for, yeah.
I love that. And some people can kind of say, okay, wonder if she's an Enneagram 4, or they might be theorizing. But either way,
Mhm.
we see the introversion you and I talked about before we got on, of both of us sort of liking to put out our words and our lessons, but not always everything about us.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
that's something that I think that keeps the commitment strong and focused when you're like, okay, here's something I keep private. You have a little more I than I do because I always turn up as an E still. But like,
Okay.
I see how your energy, you fuse it and allow it to move into all these beautiful posts. So if you guys aren't following her, make sure you're checking the show notes and just grabbing a follow even while we're talking, because they have been so instructive to all of us. You have all these lovebirds, you have all these beautiful phrases that we can use. What made you feel so passionate? As you said, part of it is just your wiring genetically, probably, and environment, but anything that stands out to you about like why you feel so passionate to help couples?
Okay. Yes.
Mhm.
First of all, I did not want to be a couples therapist. I mean, when I went to grad school, adamantly, no, it wasn't like, oh, I'm not interested. It was no way. That's not real therapy.
Mhm.
That's just like coaching, or I mean, nothing wrong with coaching. Refing is the word I meant to say, refereeing, fighting couples. But I was in love with attachment theory and I was using that with the individual adults I was working with. And then I had to see couples to get my licensing hours. And so I got a couple in and I was like, oh my God, this is really hard work. Like you've got a lot going on at
Yeah.
once. And I thought, well, this could be, I could maybe enjoy this. So I just
Yeah.
immediately went and got the EFT training
Oh my
and because I knew it was attachment theory based. And I fell in love with it. And I think what it is, I mean, there's layers here, but I think what it is just having people heal with each other in their real life, and I
God.
was finding with me and the clients, they were moving, they were growing, but then they were
Mhm.
just going back into these sick systems that were part of their pathology. And to have them be able to go through, because the work in EFT, as you know, is 50% couples work, but it's 50% individual work. And having them take that journey together just feels very, very complete to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that does. And I feel like when you were kind of first saying you don't like it, I thought, I wonder if you're so good at this, especially with that INFP, just able to empathize so deeply, then able to go and introspect, come back with more insights. You two were attaching so well, and your therapeutic bond was so good. And you're like, I want to bring that out for you, not just with me. Is that sort of how it
Yes.
also was?
Well, and I think maybe a little bit of that introvert piece feels there's what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit of a containment for my
Mhm.
introvert piece to have the partner there. Like
Yes.
it's not,
Mhm.
sometimes the energy between me and the client can start to feel a little too intense when it's individual. So it's nice to have that balancing. It's like, this is for you guys.
Yes, I love that. I
I'm
love
going to
that
give you enough of me to bring the two of you together.
yes, you're like,
Yeah.
we can have our therapeutic alliance, but you two need to be the ones in the real
Yes,
relationship out in the world doing life together. That makes so much sense and
exactly.
gives you the longevity with how you're wired as well. And I think
It
that's
really
honestly
does.
a
Yes.
beautiful gift. So that
Yes.
makes sense. What about when people are like, okay, hey, I have a different personality. I can see that you're wired different. When is that different from us saying, no, there's actually an attachment breach? Because I think
Mhm.
sometimes theory is hard to ground. Is there any way somebody might be able to just at least know, is this a good time to do some deeper attachment work, or this is more top level? That maybe the way we feel,
Yeah.
you mentioned being dysregulated a bit.
Well, I like to think of it like this. Okay, you can imagine, all of the couples right? And you might, with your familiarity with attachment theory, you might be able to say, oh, clearly, these people I can see having more of an avoidant attachment in their relationship, or these people have more of an anxious attachment in their relationship. But amongst those people, they can have all sorts of different personalities. Like their personality isn't so much defined by their attachment style.
Mhm.
Personality, I think, is more, the Enneagram, the INFP, but you can have with any given personality, you can have any type of, you're usually going to fall into anxious or avoidant. It's more like, um, I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, no, you are. It
Okay.
makes a
I'm
lot of
getting,
sense
okay.
that you're like, you could have whatever personality type you have. You're
Yeah,
still going to
yeah.
have to walk through how do you attach even apart from that. Is that sort of how it is?
Yes. Yeah, I'll give you an example. My husband, we were talking before we started, is very Italian. Okay. And
Italian.
he's very expressive, he's loud, he's dramatic.
Mhm.
But he is, I would consider him securely attached because we've done a lot of work on ourselves. But like he definitely leans toward the more avoidant attachment. He was the avoidant attached partner,
Mhm.
independent of his boisterous personality
Mhm.
because he was more likely to suppress his feelings. And when I say feelings, I mean vulnerable feelings, right? You were going to hear him getting, big and animated, but you weren't going to hear him going, yeah, I feel really demoralized in these moments.
Oh, that's
That takes me to a sad place, right? You weren't going to get that out of him. But on the surface, he's very much extroverted, and so then you take someone like me, and I'm more, a little more subdued, um,
Mhm.
and a little less likely to have, in the context of my relationship, I'm less likely to have the bigger, if we go to a party or something, I'm not going to be the one going around socializing with everyone,
Right.
right? So I'm
Right.
more introverted. However, I had more of the anxious attachment style. Like when there was a disruption, I'm the one who's more interested in trying to be heard and trying to reestablish connection and more likely to get anxious about any little signs of abandonment, things like that.
Yes, and you've really given me the surprising ability to now understand something I didn't quite grasp before. And that, thank you. It's obvious to me now that what truly whatever personality type you have, you may have a different attachment style. And I
Yes.
feel like
Yes.
there's been a lot of temptations in personality circles to be like, okay, if you're INFP or if you're an Enneagram 7, you're this. And I
Hmm.
think that you're just reminding us, even like you said, from Bowlby's work and ongoing the early attachment features can hit any of us in a different way than our
Hmm.
personalities can hit us. Maybe you grew up in a really difficult war zone and you had a different propensity, and now that's changed and shifted you. And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
thank you for just
Absolutely.
letting
Yeah.
people start with an open mind as we uncover more about attachment today. And so, you mentioned a couple styles. If we could just briefly
Mhm.
have you share, you do so much of a beautiful job of this in your book and everywhere else, but if you could let people know what are the typical styles you see of
Sure.
attachment.
Yeah, so we're going to start with the way we're going to define these styles is what is the nature of your relationship fears and how do you respond and act on those fears? Okay. So you have someone with an anxious attachment, they're going to be much more sensitive to signs of physical or emotional abandonment. So that's going to be leaving them, um, invalidating their feelings, misunderstanding their feelings, telling them their feelings are irrational. A lot of people hear that word abandonment and they think of just physical abandonment, but there's a huge emotional abandonment component to anxious attachment. You can know beyond a shadow of a doubt that your partner isn't going to leave you and still have a intense fear of emotional abandonment.
Mm.
And so, someone with an anxious attachment, they're going to be really sensitive. They're going to be scanning for any sign I'm not being emotionally held, or you might actually abandon me physically and leave me. And with that fear that they're very in touch with, the way they're typically going to respond to that is fight. Fight to be heard, fight not to be left. However that fight looks, it's an external enemy. It's I'm going to make myself needed, or I'm going to get you to hear me. I'm going to get loud and protest, or, it could be anything from people pleasing to very critical and angry.
Mm.
But it's an outward trying to close the distance. And then with an avoidant attachment, they're going to be most sensitive to I'm failing, right? Any messages that they're failing or they're worthy, that's going to really take them to their fear place. However, as opposed to anxious attachment, they're very detached from the feeling. They don't
Mm.
feel the feeling consciously, but it's there in their body.
Yeah.
And the way that they react to, I don't want to be a failure. I don't want to be seen as a failure. And I certainly don't want to see myself as a failure.
Yeah.
They're going to get reasonable, try to just get away from those feelings, try to do anything that can help them be successful, feel successful, or distract from not having been successful. Right. So if
Mhm.
you have someone with and they get in a big fight with their partner, they're going to go away going, I failed again. Why did I get sucked into that? Why didn't I just listen? And they're going to just go distract themselves with some activity. Whereas the person with the anxious attachment, they're not going to be able to distract themselves. They're consumed with their emotion. So they're just going to hyper fixate on feeling better. And then someone with a disorganized attachment, they kind of have can have qualities of both, but there's actually a pretty big trauma component there. So someone with a disorganized attachment has less ability to just trust other people to begin with because they've had layers of bad stuff happen to them. If you think of the types of environments that create, during childhood, anxious and avoidant attachment are emotionally insensitive,
Yeah.
right? Which a lot of people grow up in homes that are emotionally insensitive.
Yeah.
Someone with a disorganized attachment, they grow up in homes that are emotionally dangerous,
Mm.
meaning the person they rely on for support is also a source of harm in some way, intense emotional harm or physical harm. And
Yeah.
then we have someone with secure attachment. Okay, so secure attachment, a lot of people think, well, they never get scared. Well, they do. We
Mm-hmm.
all are wired to be uncomfortable when our relationships are disrupted, right? And they do feel that discomfort. They tend to feel it more appropriately. They're not creating it when it might not be there. They're not creating, reasons to think their partner is letting them down when maybe their partner isn't letting them down. They're a little bit living less in past trauma and more in reality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the way that they react to those feelings is healthier. They're better at getting vulnerable. They're better at healthy assertion to regain the safety and get their needs met. So
Mm.
they're more likely, someone with an anxious attachment, when they get triggered, they're more likely to be like, why don't you ever hear me? You're just an avoidant attachment, or here we go again. Where someone with an avoidant attachment, they're likely to be like, okay, calm down. You're looking at this all the wrong way. Let me help you see the light or
Yeah.
whatever. And then someone with a disorganized attachment, you don't know what you're going to get. They can just
Mhm.
explode or whatever. And then someone with a secure attachment, they're more likely to go, all right, hold on. Let here something's happening for me. When I hear you say that, I kind of go to this place where I feel kind of alone with this, and that's not a good place for me. Can we kind of try to work together here and figure something else out?
Mm, wow, that's a great explanation. And you've really cleared up some things. And I think that many listeners are finding themselves in different moments. And I appreciate that you said sometimes you might find you're the disorganized one. So you've had deeper trauma layers. And so you
Mhm.
see a bit of a mix. And those people are also often the ones we see with our couples work, therapy, or coaching. And
Yeah.
of course, I think that even the secure attachment you've just helped me to see, almost like I see a ruler on a page, and the outer limits are anxious on one end and avoidant on the other. And then I feel like you're not saying that people aren't still going to be a little anxious or avoidant, but it's almost like they're toward the middle. They're
Yes.
doing it a lot smaller. Is that what you would say?
I would. Yeah, I think they're doing the healthy versions of both,
Okay.
right? There's health in protesting. There's
Yeah.
help in trying to close the distance and reach your partner. And
Mm,
maybe not big, big protesting. There's health in turning down the emotional temperature in certain situations. There's help in, trying to help your partner kind of see some using logic and reasoning. But it's
mm.
not healthy when that's your strategy that becomes rigid and exaggerated. So they're able to kind of flexibly draw from lots of different strategies to regain connection and understanding between each other, but
Yeah.
none of it is destructive.
Yeah. That's a
And if it
great.
is destructive, now let me backpedal.
Yeah.
If it is destructive, because even the most secure couples in the world get in fights and they're not their best selves and their
Yeah.
resources are low or they go back to their old coping mechanisms. The difference between
Mm,
secure and insecure, secure couples are able to come back together and repair, make
mm,
sense of what happened through the lens of attachment instead of through the lens of, well, you were just trying to hurt me or you're the bad
mm,
guy. And so they're just able to kind of make full repairs and get back to their sweet spot
mm.
together and
Oh,
stay there for
you-
longer.
yes,
Yeah.
echoing that wholeheartedly. And I remember sharing with my audience that the late Dr. Sue Johnson also said, hey, I get triggered sometimes. I feel like my husband's the villain and I'm the hero. And everyone finds that. But
Oh
what you're
yeah.
saying is momentarily, briefly, while you're dysregulated, while your heart rate is up too high, and then you're able to come back later. So this gives everyone listening hope that you can come back and say, you know what, that was a terrible fight, but
Oh
I
yeah.
realized that I was not regulated at that time and you're not a villain. Thank you for just normalizing that that
Oh
happens to
yeah.
everybody.
Absolutely. I cannot even,
Oh,
normal, normal, normal. I always like to say, look, there's always an opportunity for redemption,
hmm.
right?
Yes.
Um, Sometimes the relationship still might have to end, like
Mhm.
I'm not saying that every relationship should stay together, but there's always an opportunity to understand what happened through a forgiving, compassionate, empathic lens
Hmm.
and find some redemption for self and other.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I just happened to see Lion King, the new Mufasa movie with my kids this weekend,
Uh-huh.
and we were all a little uncomfortable, to be honest. It was such a gorgeous movie. We loved it. Highly
Was
recommend it.
it? I
But
want
it
to see
was,
it.
yes, it was beautiful and just the artistry, but Lin-Manuel Miranda's music. But then there was like this part where the attachment was poor, and we were all like, wait a second, where's the redemptive value for Scar and
Oh
just all these
no.
things? So like,
Oh, they
yeah.
didn't give.
They
That's kind of
did give some.
surprising.
Yeah, but I
Oh,
love
did
when
they?
they give the
Okay.
backstory and they kind of did. But
Yeah.
of course, they were probably like, we only have a couple of hours to do this. But I think that we long to see that done well. And
Yeah.
I think some movies, honestly, I said to my kids, that movie was probably showing us relationships can be messy and it's okay. We still have worth and value. Because we're
Wow.
not like,
Yeah.
okay, this is this straight hero. It's like, no, even the hero was more complex and couldn't do the perfect forgiveness. But what you're letting us know in our
Okay.
relationships with our partners, we need to do that, right? We can't just let it be an attachment breach that stays where we're like constantly toxic together. And it sounds like you
Right.
truly believe that when people do their attachment work, they can find their way back to each other.
I really believe, I believe if each partner is absolutely committed to self-reflection, they will get there because you can't fully self-reflect and not begin to empathize with your partner.
Mm,
Right? If you're really fully self-reflecting and understanding your feelings, your dark places, your shame, and then why you're needing to manage these places with this bad behavior,
yeah.
you can't not recognize it in other people. So it's really the self-work in the context of the relationship that makes all of this work. So with adults, adults who have an insecure attachment are coming from backgrounds where they have an insecure attachment with
Yeah.
their earliest caregiver parents, and then they develop from that a secure attachment with self, and
Mm,
then with I'm sorry, an insecure attachment with self, and then they move into, because of that insecure attachment with self, they get caught up in insecurely attached relationships. So
mm.
as you know, we're healing the security with each other via healing the security within self. I don't know. I'm babbling, aren't I?
No, I love it because I have
Okay.
kind of know, like, you and I know when you're starting out with couples and they're almost like virtually throwing things at the wall at each other. They're not really doing that, but you feel the poison darts. Sometimes you have to like put some of your forms away, all your Gottman forms and all your levels of
Yeah,
training, and just be like, what am I going to do here and now? And I think you're naming what I want every listener to hear you saying, which is doing your self work is the place to start. Because if you don't take that baseline of work and regulate yourself, you won't be able to start empathizing with your partner. You won't be regulated enough to do the higher brain work with your personality and gifts
totally.
So thank you for just
Yep.
helping everyone to say, start with yourself. It's okay to pull back, almost like a momentary time in the withdrawing stance, just to say, take a moment,
Mhm.
take some breaths, take 30 minutes, journal if you need to. I see a lot of your posts. You give us ideas for
Yep.
this. And then you're saying, come back after you've done that self work. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, there's so much to be said for the fact that being in a safe, secure relationship helps self-growth, right?
Mhm.
But as adults, and I've grappled with this question my whole career, as adults, I don't think you get around the fact that you kind of have to start with that self-work because
Mhm.
that is the only thing that allows you to show up in a new way. You
Mhm.
know, if we're relying on our partner to be the safe person, and
Mhm.
they're relying on us to be the safe person. Hopefully, in those interactions, someone can show up as the safe person, but nobody's going to be able to show up at the safe as the safe person initially in a given interaction unless they are able to get their own nervous system into a green light zone or a yellow light zone. So yeah, I don't think you could ever move away from the idea that that self-work really does need to be the first step.
And so many personality types, as I've studied, deal with self-loathing, and that's a whole
Hmm.
different level. But just, I think that one thing you and I share with our personalities, with you being INFP and me being ENFP, is
Hmm.
that we have a high desire for being an authenticity user and loving ourselves authentically. And I think that's one of the reasons we get drawn to this field, is helping our clients to do that too. And knowing that we
Yes.
can't regulate unless, and they can't regulate unless they do that. Because if you're starting off with this feeling of like, I can't do it or I hate myself, you're never going to be able to love anybody else well, if that's where you're
No,
starting, is with this poisonous.
I absolutely agree with that. I do. I do. I mean, I know that's hard for people to hear because there's different types of love, right? So there are people who can really dislike themselves and still generally be loving people, but there's this deepest layer of love that I don't think you can really fully get to without giving that to yourself.
Yeah, me too. And I think
How
people get
could
very,
you?
right. They just get busy. Some of my clients, I just had one this past week and they were like, I see that's one of my lower functions, but they said I've had to learn to do it because I can be so busy in type A and gotta check all the boxes. But they're like, if I didn't leave
Mhm.
any time for me, it implodes on my family, it implodes on my
Yeah.
partner. So you're just really, there's multiple levels, if you guys are hearing, of her saying, take care of yourself, take care of knowing who you are, loving who you are. You deserve self-care and wellness. And then from that point, you're saying you can do good attachment work where you're checking in with your spouse. Sounds like the narrative gets healthier. Is that right?
I think so. Yes, I do. I do believe that. I think, there's something for that to be said for the quote, get your own oxygen mask first. And,
Mhm.
and sadly, some people grow up in homes where they get the oxygen mask, so it's just in them. They just have access to that oxygen mask and inside of them, within them. It's kind of like that safe place within their own body when things start to get chaotic around them. And some people have to learn how to get that inner oxygen mask as adults.
Yes. And that's really hard, but doable. And that's where your work comes in with all the clarity. Now, the book and the podcast, just giving people a way to achieve secure attachment. And you
Mhm.
remind people you can have some earned secure attachment. It doesn't have to be that you
100,000.
never get
Yeah.
it, right?
No, I mean, I think if you're listening to this podcast, then you might just go ahead and assume trying to heal, right? By being able to make sense of what ails you inside through the lens of a personality or through the lens of attachment or whatever lens you're working with at any given moment. And that is it. That is you trying to earn a safer sense of yourself, an ability to cope with your own big feelings in a healthier way, an ability to, self-soothe and self-regulate. And, you know, to me, that starts with secure attachment with self and learning about your personality and being able to work with yourself as, that piece of you is part of developing that secure attachment with self. There's lots of ways, I guess, to work with that secure attachment with yourself and making sense and understanding personality and setting yourself up for success based on your personality style is one of those ways.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And being realistic about that, knowing, hey, I lean
Yeah.
towards anxious or disorganized or any of the styles, and you're
Yeah.
just reminding yourself, give myself grace, take care of me, know that I can come towards the middle here. And I love that. And they have tools with you also. I'm going to do some fun
Yeah, I
rounds with,
thought of a,
yeah.
let me just say this. I just thought of it. It's like the metaphor is like we all need to learn to cook, right?
Mhm.
To be able, I mean, most people need to
Yeah.
learn to cook, to be able to
Yeah.
nourish ourselves.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I want to teach people how to cook. That's the secure attachment in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
But everybody works well with different types of diets or likes certain types of food better than others or and so the personality is the food you're cooking. And there's so much value in knowing what kind of food you like and finding recipes that adjust to those foods and make your body feel the best. And we're all different in that aspect. But we can't, none of us can get there if we don't first know how to cook to begin with.
Oh my gosh, that is a great analogy. We have never used that in over 400 episodes. So I love
I'm
that for our.
trying to make it clear. Sometimes I'm just all over the place. So hopefully that works for
Hey,
some
you,
people. But
yes, it does. I see
yeah.
you refining that and giving people a lens to look from and not to feel bad if they're like, I wasn't this way or I wasn't this way. And even for me, I think that you have shown me that avoidant on your posts and such. I've seen that avoidant people often get labeled as haters, and you've worked really hard to show that, as you said today, there's a lot going on behind every style, including avoidance. So thank you for all the work you've done to
Oh yeah.
educate us around
Yeah.
that.
Oh, you're welcome. That's a big passion of mine is to normalize avoidant attachment too. So
I've seen that. We could have done the whole episode on that, but you guys have to see her book for this.
yeah.
And okay, well, I will do just one more question before our quick lightning round, and that is, if just somebody said, "What would be the best step for me?" Would you say my book really is the best step for most people, or would you say I really welcome you first to my podcast or my page, or do you just feel like that's different personalities?
Well, I mean I would say probably the book is the starting point because it just kind of lays it all out there. Like here's the grounding people in the theory, right? Some people like to be grounded in the theory.
Yeah.
As we were talking, I'm a second language speaker and Italian, and I need to know the grammar so I can be better at, speaking the language on the fly and understanding what I'm doing. So
Hmm.
I think that there's so much value if you're in a relationship that, isn't struggling, in a big dramatic way, but you do like to grow as a couple. The Instagram count's probably going to be enough. Just get some tips here and there. But if you're really in a relationship that's struggling and you really want to take that next step toward growth, the book is the starting point
Hmm.
because it takes you back and helps you understand from your, experience as a child why you're showing up in your relationship the way you are, why your partner is showing up the way they are. And then I take you into these, like really organizing all of this into these negative cycles that are patterned ways of relating and how to interrupt that process, how to repair that process, and how to prevent that. And so, yeah, I think the book is probably the starting point. And then from there, the everything else starts to make a lot more sense. So you can listen to the podcast, you can get a lot from it, you can really learn from it, but it makes so much more sense why I'm doing what I'm doing and why they're doing what they're doing with this theoretical groundedness and attachment
Hmm.
theory.
Thank you. And they don't have to get their graduate degrees to do this. You have put it into a book. Thank you so much. I love your book.
You're
It's so
welcome.
beautiful and it's gotten such accolades already, as we talked about before you got on.
Oh, well,
But
thank you.
oh, yes. So let me do just a quick lightning round about Julie. Fun questions now. So
Okay.
not so heavy.
Okay.
Is quick reconnection with your spouse, do you prefer just words together to reconnect, or are you like, oh, just presence makes me feel so good?
Words,
Okay.
definitely words. Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
Okay, how about for building trust? Do you feel like daily moments of trust building or deep talks occasionally?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to
Uh-huh.
go with both,
Yeah,
but probably more the daily interactions. Yeah. Like if the daily interactions are fine, I don't really need the deep talks, but
that's a good
um,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
instructional for everybody here as well as fun because it's like
Yeah.
actually she just went deep to give us that tool that if you're like having good quality time together, the other stuff isn't as, yeah, likely
It's yeah.
to.
With
True.
that said, everybody can have moments when things start to fester. So
Yes.
there's probably something to be said for planning those moments of deep connection and
Yes, that's
to
true.
check in with each
To
other.
do that too.
Yeah. Preventive work.
Yes.
Preventative work.
Yes, I love that. Okay. So perfect date, adventure, or quiet connection?
Adventure.
Oh, yes. Talking
Yeah.
about Europe. And then last, this one
Yeah.
really is on my mind now. I'm such a foodie. What's your favorite Italian food for date night or otherwise?
It would be gluten-free pasta dishes. Yeah, I'm
Mm.
gluten-free, unfortunately. It's not the best Italian. Mo It's not the most Italian way to be in the world, is it?
Yes,
Um,
right.
yeah, I
I
love
hear
gluten-free
Italy has a lot.
pizza.
Yeah.
It does, it's actually you'd be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so gluten-free pizza is delish.
I love gluten-free pizza and I
Oh,
love gluten-free pasta. So, yeah, gluten-free pizza might be up there on my favorite
yes.
top
I can
top foods.
just, yeah, it sounds so yummy. And so does gelato, which I love. In St.
Oh,
Petersburg, we get that
gelato.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. So good. So good.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time today. Where can everyone find you? I have it in the show notes, but for those who are really just wanting to grab it now, would be great if you could share.
Sure. At the Secure Relationship, which is my Instagram account, that's where and Facebook, that's where I put out the most information. But I also have a website, thesecurerelationship.com, where I have so many resources. I have courses, I have
Oh, nice.
therapists and coaching on my team. And, I'm trying to hit like every different level of distress and every different price point. That's kind of my goal, which
Mhm.
is anything from free to, my private practice, and everything in between. And then again, just the different levels of distress. Some people just need a lot more help than others.
Mm, thank you. You named that so well. Thank you. And just we have just adored our time with you today. So thank you, Julie.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Mm. Thank you so much for joining this episode. What a rich time. I hope you will run, not walk, to grab Dr. Julie's book and truly listen to it all the way through or read it through. Take your time. This is a book I've enjoyed just highlighting and taking my time with because it's my new favorite on attachment. And I will spend literally years with a book on attachment because they're so important to the work we do. So I hope you do too. This is a rich place to begin diving in. Also, as you know, we have the Enneagram Intensive for you if you need some face-to-face time. And Dr. Julie has, as you heard her say, multiple levels of care as well. So please check everything out that she offers. We will talk to you soon. Bye bye.